The cashier mistook the owner for an elderly man from the street. One day later, he returned, and when she sees him enter the store with two police officers, she is in shock. The sun was barely peeking over the horizon when Marina arrived at the store. The cold of the morning chilled her to the bone as she searched for the keys in her bag. With a sigh of relief, she opened the door and stepped inside, turning on the lights one by one. Another day, another shift, she muttered to herself as she headed to the back room to drop off her things. The sound of the coffee machine filled the air as Marina prepared to start her shift. It was a morning like any other at the supermarket, El Ahorro Feliz, located in a middle-class neighborhood of the city. Marina, a 25-year-old young woman, had only been working there for 6 months, but already felt like a veteran. As she put on the apron with the store's logo, her colleague Lucia entered the back room. "Good morning, Marina." Lucia greeted her with a smile. "Ready for another exciting day in retail paradise?" Marina chuckled half-heartedly. "As ready as one can be on a Monday morning." "How was your weekend?" "Oh, the usual," Lucia replied, tying her hair into a ponytail. "Netflix, junk food, and sleeping in." "How about yours?" "Pretty much the same," Marina said. "Though I had to study for an exam. You know, college doesn't pay for itself." Lucia nodded understandingly. "I hear you, girl. But hey, at least you've got a job to pay for it, right?" "I guess so," Marina conceded, though inwardly she wondered if all the effort was really worth it. The two of them left the back room and headed to their respective stations. Marina took her place behind the cash register, mentally preparing herself for another long workday. The first customers arrived soon after. An elderly lady buying bread and milk, a man in a suit rushing to grab breakfast for the office, a mother with two rowdy children begging for candy. Marina served them all with a professional smile, though inwardly she was counting the minutes until her break. Around 10 a.m., the door opened, and a man walked in who immediately caught Marina's attention. He was dressed in worn, dirty clothes, with an unkempt beard and greasy hair. His appearance strongly contrasted with the clean and orderly atmosphere of the store. "Great," Marina thought irritably. "Another homeless guy here to cause trouble." The man walked over to the produce section, carefully examining the items. Marina watched him warily, waiting for the moment she'd have to ask him to leave. Several minutes passed, and the man was still browsing, now checking out the bakery section. Marina decided it was time to act. She approached Lucia, who was restocking products on a nearby shelf. "Hey, Lucia," Marina whispered. "Do you see that guy over there? I think we should get him out before he causes any problems." Lucia glanced in the direction Marina was pointing. "The one in the old jacket?" "Yeah, I see him. But he hasn't done anything wrong, has he?" "Not yet," Marina replied, "but you know how these people are. He's probably looking for something to steal or will start bothering the customers for money." Lucia hesitated. "I don't know, Marina. We can't just kick someone out because of how they look. What if he's a regular customer?" Marina rolled her eyes. "Come on, Lucia. Look at him. It's obvious he can't afford anything here. He's just wasting time and scaring off the real customers." At that moment, the man approached the bakery counter, where Pedro, another employee, was working. "Excuse me," the man said in a raspy voice. "Could I get a freshly baked baguette?" Pedro, unaware of the conversation between Marina and Lucia, responded kindly, "Of course, sir. Anything else?" The man shook his head, and Pedro handed him the baguette wrapped in a paper bag. Marina watched the scene in disbelief. "See?" Lucia said. "He's buying something. You shouldn't judge people based on their appearance." Marina frowned, unconvinced. "We'll see if he actually pays for it." The man made his way to the register, where Marina awaited him with a less-than-friendly expression. As he approached, she caught a faint whiff of alcohol and sweat coming from him. "Good morning," the man said, placing the baguette on the counter. Marina didn't reply to his greeting. Instead, she said curtly, "That'll be €2.50. The man reached into the pocket of his worn-out jacket and pulled out a battered leather wallet. Marina was surprised to see him take out a €50 bill and hand it to her. "Sorry," the man said with a shy smile. "I don't have any change." Marina looked at the bill suspiciously, thinking it might be fake. She examined it carefully against the light and used the counterfeit bill marker. To her surprise, the bill was genuine. "One moment," she said as she opened the cash register to get the change. As she counted the coins, Marina couldn't help but wonder where this man, who looked like a vagrant, had gotten a €50 bill. Her suspicion flared up again. "Excuse me," she said in an inquisitive tone. "May I ask where you got this bill?" The man looked at her in surprise. "Pardon me, the bill," Marina insisted. "It's unusual to see someone like you with that much money." The man's face hardened. "Someone like me? What do you mean by that, miss?" Marina, feeling suddenly uncomfortable but determined to hold her ground, replied, "Well, you know. Your appearance. You don't seem like someone who could afford to shop here." The man stared at her, a mixture of disbelief and anger in his eyes. "Are you suggesting I stole this money?" "I didn't say that," Marina defended herself, though that was exactly what she was thinking. "It just seems strange, that's all." "Strange?" the man repeated, his voice rising slightly. "What's strange is that a store employee would dare question where a customer's money comes from. Do you interrogate all your customers like this?" The argument began to attract the attention of other customers and employees. Lucia approached, concerned about the situation. "Marina, what's going on?" she asked in a low voice. Before Marina could respond, the man spoke. "What's going on is that your colleague here seems to think I'm a thief or a beggar." Lucia looked at Marina reproachfully. "Marina, is that true?" Marina felt cornered. I was just being cautious. We don't know who this man is." "I don't need to identify myself to buy a simple baguette," the man said, his voice trembling with indignation. "I demand to speak to the manager of this store." Marina felt panic take over her. If the manager found out about this, she could be in serious trouble. She tried to calm the situation. "Sir, I'm sorry if I offended you. That wasn't my intention," but the man interrupted her. "It's too late for apologies, miss. Your behavior has been completely unacceptable." At that moment, the store manager, Mr. Gomez, appeared, drawn by the commotion. "What's going on here?" he asked in an authoritative voice. The man turned to him. "Are you the manager? Good, because I have a complaint about the treatment I've received in this establishment." Mr. Gomez looked at Marina sternly. "Marina, what have you done?" Marina, feeling smaller and smaller, tried to explain. I was just being cautious." This man seemed suspicious and, "Suspicious?" the man interrupted. "Why? Because of my clothes? My appearance? Let me tell you something, young lady. Never judge a book by its cover." Mr. Gomez intervened. "Sir, I apologize for any misunderstanding. Please come with me to my office so we can discuss this in private." As the manager led the man away, Marina remained at the register, feeling humiliated and confused. Lucia came over to her. "Marina, what were you thinking?" she whispered. "You can't treat customers like that, no matter how they look." Marina nodded, too embarrassed to speak. She knew she had made a serious mistake, but her pride wouldn't let her fully admit it. Several tense minutes passed before Mr. Gomez and the man emerged from the office. The manager looked pale and nervous, while the man maintained a serious expression. Mr. Gomez approached Marina. "Marina, come to my office right now." With her heart pounding, Marina followed her boss, aware that all eyes were on her. Once inside the office, Mr. Gomez closed the door and sat down behind his desk. "Marina," he began gravely. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Marina lowered her gaze. I suppose I was too suspicious of that customer." "Suspicious?" Mr. Gomez repeated. "You were downright discriminatory. And the worst part is, you don't even know who you've insulted." Marina looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" Mr. Gomez sighed deeply. "That man you treated like a vagrant, is the owner of the entire supermarket chain." The blood drained from Marina's face. "What? But his appearance." "Mr. Rodriguez, our owner, has a habit of visiting his stores incognito to see how customers are really treated," Mr. Gomez explained. "And you, Marina, have just given him the worst possible impression of our store." Marina felt dizzy. I had no idea. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Gomez." What's going to happen now?" Mr. Gomez looked at her with a mix of disappointment and concern. "That depends on Mr. Rodriguez. For now, go home. You're suspended until further notice while we decide how to handle this situation." Marina nodded, too shocked to argue. She gathered her things in silence and left the store, not knowing if she would ever cross that door again as an employee. As she walked home, tears began to stream down her cheeks. Not only had she lost her job, but she had also embarrassed the entire store in front of the owner. How could she have been so stupid and prejudiced? The weight of her actions began to sink in. Marina realized she had judged someone based solely on their appearance, committing exactly the kind of mistake she had always criticized in others. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on her. She arrived at her small apartment and collapsed onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably. What was she going to do now? This job was her only means of paying for college and her expenses. Without it, all her plans and dreams would come crashing down. As the afternoon wore on, Marina replayed the day's events over and over in her mind. Every time she remembered the look of pain and anger in Mr. Rodriguez's eyes, she felt a fresh wave of shame and regret. Her phone rang several times. They were messages from Lucia and other coworkers, asking what had happened and if she was okay. Marina ignored them all. She didn't have the strength to face anyone right now. She knew it probably wouldn't change anything, but at least she could try to fix the damage she had caused. With that resolution in mind, Marina finally got up from the couch and headed to the kitchen. She hadn't eaten all day, and her stomach was growling loudly. As she prepared a simple sandwich, her mind continued to swirl with the events of the day. How could I have been so blind, she asked herself aloud, spreading butter on the bread with more force than necessary. I always thought I was open-minded, and look at me now. The sound of the doorbell interrupted her thoughts. Marina frowned, wondering who could be at her door at this hour. She wasn't in the mood for visitors. She walked over to the door and peered through the peephole. To her surprise, it was Lucia. Marina hesitated for a moment before opening the door. Lucia stood there, still in her work uniform, holding a plastic bag in one hand. "Hey," Lucia said with a timid smile. "I thought you might need some company, and food." Marina felt tears welling up in her eyes again. "Lucia, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Lucia replied, stepping into the apartment. "I just came to make sure you're okay. And I brought ice cream." Marina couldn't help but let out a small laugh through her tears. "Ice cream? Really?" Lucia shrugged as she headed to the kitchen. "Ice cream always helps in tough times. It's a scientific fact." The two of them sat at the small kitchen table, each with a bowl of ice cream in front of them. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Marina broke the silence. "Lucia, I'm so sorry. You were right about not judging people by their appearance. I should have listened to you." Lucia nodded, taking a spoonful of ice cream before responding. "Look, Marina, we all make mistakes. The important thing is to learn from them." "But this mistake could cost me my job," Marina said, playing with her ice cream without actually eating it. "And not just that, what if Mr. Rodriguez decides to shut down the store because of me? Everyone would lose their jobs." Lucia shook her head. "I don't think it'll come to that. Besides, from what I heard after you left, Mr. Rodriguez was more disappointed than angry." Marina looked up, surprised. "Really? What else did you hear?" "Well," Lucia began, leaning forward as if sharing a secret, "after you left, Mr. Rodriguez talked to all of us. He said the purpose of his surprise visits isn't to catch employees making mistakes, but to identify areas where we can improve as a team." Marina listened intently, a small spark of hope igniting in her chest. Lucia continued, "He said what happened with you was a perfect example of why it's important not to make assumptions about people based solely on their appearance. But he also said he understands that we all have unconscious biases and that the important thing is to recognize them and work to overcome them." "Wow," Marina said, finally taking a spoonful of ice cream. "He sounds like a pretty understanding boss." "He is," Lucia nodded. "In fact, he asked all of us to reflect on our own biases and how they might affect how we treat customers." Marina sat in silence for a moment, processing all this information. Finally, she spoke. "Even so, I can't believe what I did. I feel terrible." Lucia reached across the table and squeezed Marina's hand. "I know. But hey, at least you learned an important lesson, right? And who knows, maybe this will make you a better employee in the future." Marina nodded slowly. "You're right. If they give me the chance, I swear I'll never judge anyone by their appearance again." "That's the spirit," Lucia smiled. "Now, eat your ice cream before it melts. Tomorrow is a new day." The two friends spent the rest of the evening talking, laughing, and, at times, shedding a few tears. Marina felt grateful to have a friend like Lucia to support her in such a difficult moment. The next morning, Marina woke up early. She hadn't slept much, but she felt determined. She dressed carefully, choosing her most professional outfit. If she was going to apologize to the owner of the company, she wanted to make the best possible impression. As she looked at herself in the mirror, rehearsing what she was going to say, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Mr. Gomez. "Marina, please come to the store at 9 a.m. Mr. Rodriguez wants to speak with you." Marina felt her heart race. This was the moment of truth. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. "You can do this," she told herself. "Just be honest and show that you've learned from your mistake." She left her apartment with plenty of time to spare. She didn't want to be late under any circumstances. As she walked to the store, she mentally rehearsed everything she wanted to say. She wanted to sincerely apologize but also wanted to show that she understood the gravity of her actions and that she was committed to improving. When she arrived at the store, she was surprised to see that it was closed. Normally, by this time, it would already be open and full of customers shopping for breakfast. With a trembling hand, she knocked on the door. After what felt like an eternity, Mr. Gomez opened the door. His expression was serious, but not hostile. "Good morning, Marina," he said, stepping aside to let her in. "Mr. Rodriguez is waiting for you in my office." Marina nodded, unable to find her voice. As she walked toward the office, she noticed that the store was completely empty. There were no other employees in sight. This only heightened her anxiety. When she reached the office door, she paused for a moment to take one last deep breath. Then, summoning all the courage she could, she knocked on the door. "Come in," came a voice from inside. Marina opened the door and stepped inside. There, sitting behind Mr. Gomez's desk, was the man she had treated so poorly the day before. But today, his appearance was completely different. Mr. Rodriguez was dressed in an impeccable suit, his hair and beard perfectly groomed, and on his wrist gleamed a watch that probably cost more than Marina's annual salary. Yet his eyes were the same as she remembered, piercing and full of intelligence. "Good morning, Marina," Mr. Rodriguez said, his voice calm and controlled. "Please, have a seat." Marina sat down in the chair in front of the desk, her hands clasped tightly in her lap to keep them from visibly trembling. "Mr. Rodriguez," she began, her voice barely a whisper. I want to apologize for my behavior yesterday. It was completely unacceptable and..." Mr. Rodriguez raised a hand, interrupting her. "Marina, before you continue, I want you to understand something. What happened yesterday was indeed unacceptable. But you're not here to be punished." Marina blinked, confused. "I'm not." "No," Mr. Rodriguez confirmed. "You're here because I want to understand why it happened. I want to know what led you to act the way you did." Marina remained silent for a moment, surprised by this unexpected turn in the conversation. Finally, she gathered her thoughts and began to speak. "Honestly, Mr. Rodriguez, I don't have a good excuse. I let my prejudices and fears cloud my judgment. I saw someone who didn't fit my idea of a typical customer and assumed the worst. It was a terrible mistake, and I'm deeply ashamed of it." Mr. Rodriguez nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving Marina's. "I appreciate your honesty. But tell me, why do you think you had those prejudices in the first place?" Marina thought for a moment before responding. "I suppose, part of it comes from my experiences. I've seen situations where homeless people have caused problems in the store. But that's no excuse to generalize and treat someone poorly just because of their appearance." "Exactly," Mr. Rodriguez said. "Prejudices don't come out of nowhere. They're often the result of past experiences or what we've been taught. But as you said, that doesn't justify them." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "Marina, do you know why I make these surprise visits dressed the way I was yesterday?" Marina shook her head. "I do it because I want to see how my employees treat people who society often ignores or looks down on. I want to see if the respect and kindness we preach extend to everyone, regardless of their appearance or economic situation." Marina felt tears welling up in her eyes again. "And I failed that test completely." "Yes, you did," Mr. Rodriguez confirmed, his voice firm but not cruel. "But the question now is, what are you going to do about it?" Marina straightened up in her chair, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "I want to learn from this, Mr. Rodriguez. I want to be better. If you give me another chance, I promise I'll never judge anyone by their appearance again. I'll treat every customer, every person, with the respect they deserve." Mr. Rodriguez studied her for a long moment before speaking. "I'm glad to hear that, Marina. Because I have a proposal for you." Marina held her breath, waiting. I want you to organize and lead a sensitivity workshop for all the employees in this store. I want you to share your experience, what you've learned, and how we can all work to overcome our unconscious biases. Marina blinked, surprised. Me? But, why would you trust me to do something like that after what I did? Mr. Rodriguez smiled for the first time since the conversation began. Because, Marina, sometimes the best teachers are those who have made mistakes and learned from them. Your experience can be a powerful lesson for everyone. Marina felt a mix of emotions, relief at not having lost her job, gratitude for the second chance, and determination to do things right this time. Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez, she said, her voice trembling but firm. I won't let you down. I'm sure you won't, Mr. Rodriguez replied. Now, go home and rest. Tomorrow you'll start planning that workshop. And remember, Marina, we all make mistakes. What defines us is not our mistakes, but how we respond to them. Marina nodded, standing up from the chair. As she headed to the door, she paused and turned to Mr. Rodriguez one last time. Mr. Rodriguez, she said, thank you for this lesson. I promise I'll carry it with me always. Mr. Rodriguez nodded with a smile. I hope so, Marina. I hope so. As Marina left the office, she felt as if a huge weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She knew she had a lot of work ahead of her, but she was grateful for the opportunity to correct her mistake and grow as a person. Outside, the sun was shining brightly, as if reflecting the new hope Marina felt. As she walked home, thinking about everything she had learned in the past 24 hours, she promised herself she would never again judge a book by its cover. The lesson had been harsh, but the learning was invaluable. And so, with a mix of humility and determination, Marina prepared herself for the next chapter of her life, one she hoped would be filled with more understanding, empathy, and respect for everyone around her. The sun was just peeking over the horizon when Marina woke up. She had spent a restless night, her mind still replaying the events of the previous day. She got out of bed with a mix of anxiety and determination, knowing that today she would face the consequences of her actions. As she got ready for work, Marina mentally rehearsed what she would say to her colleagues. How would she explain her behavior? How would they react? Come on, Marina, she said to herself in the mirror. You can do this. It's time to face the music. With one final sigh, she left her apartment and headed to the store. The walk, which normally took her 15 minutes, felt endless today. Each step brought her closer to what she feared would be a day filled with accusing looks and whispers behind her back. When she finally arrived at the store, she paused in front of the door, taking a deep breath before entering. The jingle of the bell announced her arrival, and she immediately felt all eyes on her. Lucia was the first to approach. Marina, are you okay? We were worried about you. Marina forced a smile. I'm surviving. Thanks for asking, Lucia. Before she could say more, Pedro, the bakery boy, approached with a curious expression on his face. Hey, Marina, he said quietly, is it true what they're saying? That the guy you threw out yesterday was actually the owner? Marina felt a lump form in her throat. Yes, Pedro. It's true. A murmur spread through the store. Marina could feel the stares of her colleagues, some of surprise, others of pity, and some, she noticed with a chill, of something that resembled satisfaction. Mr. Gomez stepped out of his office, drawn by the growing murmur. What's going on here? Everyone get back to work. As the employees dispersed, Mr. Gomez approached Marina. Marina, come to my office for a moment, please. With her heart pounding, Marina followed her boss. Once inside the office, Mr. Gomez closed the door and sat behind his desk. Marina, he began, his voice serious but not hostile, I'm sure you've realized by now that everyone knows what happened yesterday. Marina nodded, unable to find her voice. Mr. Gomez continued, Mr. Rodriguez informed me about your conversation yesterday and the task he's assigned to you. I want you to know that you have my full support in this. Marina looked up, surprised. Really? Yes, Mr. Gomez nodded. What you did yesterday was a serious mistake, but the way you're handling the consequences speaks volumes about your character. However, he added, his tone becoming more serious, you must understand that this won't be easy. Some of your colleagues may be less understanding. As if to confirm his words, there was a knock on the door. It was Carlos, one of the store's longest-serving employees. Mr. Gomez, Carlos said, walking in without waiting for an invitation, I need to talk to you about, oh. He stopped when he saw Marina. I didn't know you were busy. Mr. Gomez frowned. Carlos, I'm in the middle of an important conversation. Can it wait? Carlos glanced at Marina with barely concealed disdain. I suppose it can. Though I'm not sure why you're wasting your time with someone who nearly cost us all our jobs. Carlos! Mr. Gomez exclaimed, standing up. That's completely inappropriate. But Carlos had already left, closing the door harder than necessary. Marina sank into her chair, feeling like she had just been punched in the stomach. He's right, she muttered. I almost cost everyone their jobs. Mr. Gomez sighed, sitting back down. Marina, what you did was a mistake, yes. But we all make mistakes. What matters is how we handle them and what we learn from them. Marina nodded slowly, trying to believe in her boss's words. Thank you, Mr. Gomez. I'll do everything I can to make this right. I know you will, Mr. Gomez said with a small smile. Now, get back to work. And if anyone gives you trouble, let me know. Marina left the office feeling a little better, but still aware of the looks that followed her as she made her way to her register. Throughout the morning, Marina could feel the tension in the air. Some regular customers noticed something was off, casting curious glances at the employees who whispered among themselves when they thought no one was looking. During her break, Marina sat alone in the employee lounge, picking at her sandwich without much appetite. She was so lost in her thoughts that she didn't notice when Lucia came in and sat across from her. Earth to Marina, Lucia said, snapping her fingers in front of her face. Marina blinked, snapping out of her daze. Oh, Lucia. Sorry, I was thinking. Lucia looked at her with concern. Do you want to talk about it? Marina sighed. I don't know what to say, Lucia. I feel like I've let everyone down. Like I've betrayed the trust Mr. Gomez put in me. Hey, Lucia said, placing a hand over Marina's, don't be so hard on yourself. Yes, you made a mistake. But you're trying to make it right, aren't you? That's what matters. Marina smiled weakly. Thanks, Lucia. I don't know what I'd do without you. You'd probably starve, Lucia joked, nodding toward Marina's barely touched sandwich. Come on, eat up. You'll need your strength to get through the rest of the day. Just as Marina was about to take a bite of her sandwich, the door flew open. It was Carlos, followed by a couple of other employees. Oh, look, Carlos said sarcastically, it's our local star. The girl who almost got us all fired. Marina felt her throat close up. Lucia stood up, facing Carlos. Enough, Carlos. We all make mistakes. Carlos let out a bitter laugh. Mistakes? You call insulting the owner of the company a mistake? That goes beyond a simple mistake. Another employee, Ana, chimed in. Carlos is right. What if Mr. Rodriguez decides to shut down the store because of this? Some of us have families to support. Marina felt smaller with each word. She wanted to defend herself, to explain what had happened, but the words seemed stuck in her throat. Seeing her friend's distress, Lucia took control. Listen, everyone, she said firmly, what Marina did was wrong, yes. But Mr. Rodriguez has already spoken to her and given her a second chance. If he can forgive her, who are we to judge? Carlos scoffed. Please. He's probably just using her as an example. I bet they'll fire her in a few days. No, they won't, a voice said from the door. Everyone turned to see Mr. Gomez standing there, his expression a mixture of disappointment and anger. In fact, Mr. Rodriguez has given Marina a very important task. Silence fell over the room. Marina, sensing it was time to speak, stood up. It's true, she said, her voice trembling slightly at first but growing stronger with each word. I made a terrible mistake yesterday. I judged someone based solely on their appearance, and it turned out to be the owner of our company. It was a hard, but necessary lesson. She took a deep breath before continuing. Mr. Rodriguez could have fired me. That's probably what many of you would have done in his place. But instead, he gave me the opportunity to learn from my mistake and share that lesson with all of you. The other employees looked at her with a mix of surprise and curiosity. Even Carlos seemed to have lost some of his hostility. What do you mean? Ana asked. Marina looked at Mr. Gomez, who nodded encouragingly. Mr. Rodriguez has asked me to organize and lead a sensitivity workshop for all the employees. He wants us to share this experience so that we can all learn not to judge people by their appearance. A murmur spread through the room. Carlos, still skeptical, asked, and why should we listen to you? What makes you qualified to teach us anything? Marina looked him straight in the eye. Because I made the mistake that we all fear making. Because I've experienced firsthand the consequences of my prejudices. And because I'm determined not to make that mistake again and to help others avoid it. Mr. Gomez stepped forward. The workshop will be mandatory for all employees. And I expect everyone to participate with an open mind. With that, he left the room, leaving the employees in thoughtful silence. One by one, the employees began to leave, some casting curious glances at Marina, others still wearing expressions of doubt. Carlos was the last to leave, pausing at the door to look at Marina. I hope you know what you're doing, he said before walking out. Marina collapsed into her chair, emotionally exhausted. Lucia sat beside her, putting an arm around her shoulders. You did well, Lucia said softly. Really well, Marina smiled weakly. Thanks. But this is just the beginning, isn't it? Lucia nodded. Yes, but you're not alone in this. I'm here for you, and I'm sure others will support you once they understand what you're trying to do. The rest of the day passed in a blur for Marina. She tried to focus on her work, but couldn't help but notice the whispers and glances that followed her. Some regular customers noticed her low spirits and asked if she was okay. Marina simply forced a smile and assured them that everything was fine. When her shift finally ended, Marina felt physically and emotionally drained. She headed to the locker room to gather her things, eager to get home and leave this endless day behind. As she changed, she overheard voices approaching. She recognized the voices of Ana and another employee, Miguel. What do you think of this whole situation? Miguel asked. Ana sighed. I don't know. On the one hand, I understand why everyone's upset. Marina really messed up. But on the other hand, haven't we all made mistakes at some point? I guess so, Miguel admitted. But this was a pretty big mistake. I know, Ana said. But did you see her face when she was talking in the break room? She looked genuinely sorry and determined to make things right. True, Miguel said. I guess we'll have to see how this workshop turns out. The voices faded as they walked away. Marina remained still, processing what she had just heard. Maybe, just maybe, not everyone was against her. With a sigh, she finished changing and left the locker room. As she headed for the exit, she saw Mr. Gomez in his office. She hesitated for a moment before knocking on the door. Come in, Mr. Gomez said. Marina stepped inside, closing the door behind her. Mr. Gomez, I just wanted to thank you for your support today. Mr. Gomez smiled tiredly. There's nothing to thank me for, Marina. You handled a difficult situation with grace and maturity. I'm proud of you. Marina felt a lump form in her throat. Thank you, sir. I promise I won't let you down. I know you won't, Mr. Gomez said. Now, go home and rest. Tomorrow's another day. Marina nodded and headed for the door. Just as she was about to leave, Mr. Gomez called after her. Oh, and Marina, Mr. Gomez said, making her stop at the door, Mr. Rodriguez will be coming tomorrow to discuss the details of the workshop. He'll be here early, so make sure you're here by 8 o'clock sharp. Marina felt her heart skip a beat. Mr. Rodriguez is coming tomorrow, she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Mr. Gomez nodded. Yes, he wants to personally oversee the planning of the workshop. It's a big opportunity, Marina. Don't waste it. I won't, sir. Thanks for letting me know, Marina replied, trying to maintain her composure despite the panic rising inside her. She left the office and headed for the store's exit, her mind racing with this new information. Mr. Rodriguez would be coming tomorrow. The man she had insulted and nearly kicked out of the store would be there, face to face with her once again. As she walked home, Marina couldn't stop thinking about what might happen tomorrow. What if Mr. Rodriguez had changed his mind? What if he decided it was too risky to trust someone who had made such a grave mistake with this task? So absorbed in her thoughts, she almost bumped into someone on the street. Watch it, a familiar voice exclaimed. Marina looked up and found herself face to face with Carlos. Oh, I'm sorry, Carlos, Marina said, stepping back. I didn't see you. Carlos looked at her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, to Marina's surprise, he sighed and said, Look, Marina, about today. Marina braced herself for another verbal attack, but what came next took her by surprise. Maybe I was a little too hard on you, Carlos continued, avoiding her gaze. It's just that, well, we're all worried about our jobs, you know. Marina nodded slowly. I understand, Carlos. And you have every right to be upset with me. What I did was terrible, and it could have had consequences for everyone. Carlos looked at her, a spark of curiosity in his eyes. Then why did you do it? I've never seen you act like that before. Marina bit her lip, considering her response. Honestly, Carlos, it was pure prejudice. I saw someone who didn't fit my idea of a normal customer, and I let my fears and assumptions take over. It was a huge mistake, and I'm determined to learn from it and help others avoid making the same mistake. Carlos studied her for a moment before nodding slowly. I guess we all have our prejudices, huh? Even I judged your intentions pretty quickly today. Marina smiled weakly. It seems we all have something to learn. Yeah, I guess we do, Carlos said. There was an awkward pause before he added, well, I'd better get going. See you tomorrow, Marina. See you tomorrow, Carlos, Marina replied, watching him walk away. As she resumed her walk home, Marina felt a little lighter. The conversation with Carlos had given her a glimmer of hope. If even he, who had been so hostile at first, could begin to understand, maybe there was a chance this workshop could really make a difference. When she arrived at her apartment, Marina collapsed onto the couch, exhausted. She pulled out her phone and saw several messages from Lucia. Lucia, hey. How are you holding up after everything that happened today? Lucia, do you want me to come over? We could order pizza and talk. Lucia, Marina, answer when you can. I'm worried about you. Marina smiled, grateful to have such a loyal friend. She quickly typed out a reply. Marina, I'm okay, thanks for checking in. It's been a long day, but I think things might be getting better. Rain check on the pizza. I need to prep some stuff for tomorrow. Lucia's reply came almost instantly. Lucia, of course. No problem. Do you need help with anything? Marina, thanks, but I think this is something I need to do on my own. Mr. Rodriguez is coming tomorrow to discuss the workshop. Lucia, wow. Good luck, Marina. I know you'll do great. I'll be thinking of you. Marina, thanks, Lucia. You're the best. With a sigh, Marina put down her phone and headed to her small desk. She pulled out a notebook and pen and began writing down ideas for the workshop. She wanted to be as prepared as possible for her meeting with Mr. Rodriguez tomorrow. As she wrote, her thoughts kept returning to the events of the past 2 days. How one moment of prejudice had changed everything, how she had gone from being just another cashier to being the center of attention in the entire store. Come on, Marina, focus, she told herself. This is your chance to make things right. She worked late into the night, writing and crossing out ideas, making lists and outlines. When she finally went to bed, her mind was still racing, but now with purpose and renewed determination. The next morning, Marina woke up before her alarm went off. She dressed carefully, choosing her most professional outfit. As she looked at herself in the mirror, she tried to project a confidence she didn't quite feel. You can do this, she told herself. You've learned from your mistake, and now you can help others. She arrived at the store at 7:45, 15 minutes before the agreed-upon time. To her surprise, she wasn't the only one who had arrived early. Mr. Gomez was already there, along with Mr. Rodriguez. Marina felt her heart race at the sight of the company owner. He was dressed in an immaculate suit, a far cry from the disheveled clothes he had worn the first time she saw him. However, his eyes were the same, sharp and intelligent. Good morning, Marina, Mr. Rodriguez said with a kind smile. I'm glad to see you're punctual. Marina swallowed nervously. Good morning, Mr. Rodriguez. Mr. Gomez. Mr. Gomez nodded in her direction. Marina, Mr. Rodriguez and I were discussing some details about the workshop. Why don't you tell us what you've come up with so far? Marina nodded, pulling out her notebook from her bag. With slightly trembling hands, she opened it and began to explain her ideas. Well, I've been thinking about structuring the workshop into 3 main parts, she began. First, a discussion on what prejudice is and how it affects our daily interactions. Then, sharing personal experiences, including mine, of course. And finally, practical exercises to help us recognize and overcome our biases. Mr. Rodriguez listened intently, nodding occasionally. When Marina finished, there was a moment of silence that seemed to last forever. Finally, Mr. Rodriguez spoke. I like your approach, Marina. It shows that you've thought deeply about the subject. However, I have a question for you. Marina held her breath, waiting. How do you plan to handle resistance? Mr. Rodriguez asked. Because, believe me, there will be resistance. Some people won't want to admit they have prejudices, others will feel attacked. How do you plan to deal with that? Marina blinked, surprised by the question. She hadn't considered that aspect. She took a deep breath, trying to organize her thoughts. Well, she began slowly, I guess the first thing would be to create a safe environment where everyone feels comfortable sharing. Emphasize that we all have prejudices and that the goal isn't to shame anyone but to learn and grow together. She paused, thinking. And maybe we could start with less personal examples before diving into more personal experiences. That way, people can see the issue more objectively before applying it to themselves. Mr. Rodriguez smiled, a look of approval on his face. Excellent answer, Marina. I can see you've thought about this carefully. Marina felt a weight lift off her shoulders. Maybe, just maybe, she could do this after all. Mr. Gomez then spoke up. Marina, why don't you go ahead and prepare the conference room? Mr. Rodriguez and I will finish discussing a few details and then we'll join you. Marina nodded, grateful for the chance to have a moment to collect herself. As she headed to the conference room, she overheard Mr. Rodriguez's voice. You know, Gomez, I think we've found someone special here. Marina's heart skipped a beat at hearing those words. Perhaps this mistake, as terrible as it was, could be the start of something important. With renewed determination, she entered the conference room, ready to face whatever came next. As she prepared the room, arranging chairs and setting up the whiteboard, Marina couldn't help but think about how surreal this whole situation was. Just 2 days ago, she had been just another cashier, blending into the background. Now, she was about to lead a sensitivity workshop for the entire store, with the support of the company's owner. Her thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of the first employees. Lucia walked in, followed closely by Pedro and Ana. Marina! Lucia exclaimed, walking up to her. How are you feeling? Do you need help with anything? Marina smiled gratefully at her friend. I'm okay, thanks, Lucia. A little nervous, but I think I can handle it. Ana approached, a curious expression on her face. So, what exactly is this workshop going to be about? Marina took a deep breath before answering. We're going to talk about prejudice, Ana. How it affects all of us and how we can work to overcome it. Pedro let out a nervous laugh. Sounds intense. Are you sure you're ready for this, Marina? Before Marina could respond, a voice from the door startled them all. I think Marina is more than ready for this, Mr. Rodriguez said, walking into the room followed by Mr. Gomez. All the employees fell silent, staring in awe at the company's owner. Marina could see how some of them, including Carlos, who had just walked in, paled as they recognized the man they had seen dressed like a vagrant just days ago. Mr. Rodriguez made his way to the front of the room, standing next to Marina. Good morning, everyone, he began. I know many of you are surprised to see me here, and even more surprised by the events of the past few days. But today, I'm not here to judge or punish anyone. I'm here because I believe we all have something important to learn. He paused, looking at each of the employees before continuing. What happened to Marina could have happened to any of you. In fact, I dare say that all of you, at some point, have judged someone based solely on their appearance. I know I have. A murmur of surprise spread through the room. Marina looked at Mr. Rodriguez in astonishment. She hadn't expected him to admit something like that. Yes, it's true, Mr. Rodriguez continued. None of us are free from prejudice. The difference lies in how we choose to handle it. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. He turned to Marina with an encouraging smile. Marina, the floor is yours. With her heart pounding, Marina stepped forward. She looked at her colleagues, seeing a mix of curiosity, nervousness, and, in some cases, skepticism on their faces. Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez, Marina began, her voice trembling slightly at first but gaining strength with each word. As you all know, 2 days ago I made a terrible mistake. I judged someone based solely on their appearance, and it turned out to be our boss. She paused, looking directly at Carlos, who had been her most vocal critic. It was a mistake that could have cost me my job and that could have had consequences for all of you. And for that, I want to apologize once again. Carlos lowered his gaze, avoiding eye contact. Marina continued, but today, we're not here to dwell on that mistake. We're here to learn from it. To understand why we have prejudices, how they affect us, and how we can work to overcome them. The sun was just peeking over the horizon when Marina arrived at the store. It had been 2 weeks since the incident with Mr. Rodriguez and the subsequent sensitivity workshop. Things seemed to have returned to normal, or at least that's what Marina thought. As she opened the door to the store, she couldn't help but recall the events of the past weeks. The workshop had been a surprising success. Even Carlos, who had been her most vocal critic, had actively participated and admitted to having his own prejudices. "Good morning, Marina," greeted Lucia, who was already inside preparing the cash registers. "Good morning, Lucia," Marina replied with a smile. "How's everything going?" Lucia shrugged. "The usual. Though, there's something strange in the air today. Don't you feel it?" Marina frowned. "What do you mean?" Before Lucia could respond, Mr. Gomez's office door flew open. The manager came out with a grave expression on his face. "Marina, Lucia, I need to speak with both of you," he said in a tense voice. "And with the rest of the staff when they arrive." The two girls exchanged worried looks before following Mr. Gomez into his office. Once inside, they noticed they weren't alone. 2 men in dark suits were standing by the desk. "Marina, Lucia," Mr. Gomez began, his voice unusually serious, "these are Mr. Garcia and Mr. Lopez. They are police officers." Marina felt her heart stop. "Police?" she repeated, her voice barely a whisper. What's going on?" Detective Garcia stepped forward. "Miss Marina, we're here to investigate an incident that occurred 2 weeks ago. We understand that you had an altercation with a customer who turned out to be the owner of this supermarket chain, correct?" Marina nodded slowly, feeling the world fade around her. "Yes, but that was resolved. Mr. Rodriguez forgave me and..." "I'm afraid the situation is more complicated than that," Detective Lopez interrupted. "We've received an anonymous complaint suggesting that your behavior toward Mr. Rodriguez was part of a larger plan to discredit the company." "What?" Lucia exclaimed, her voice filled with disbelief. "That's ridiculous. Marina would never do something like that." Mr. Gomez raised a hand to calm the situation. "Please, detectives, there must be some mistake. I know Marina, and I know what happened was a simple misunderstanding." Detective Garcia shook his head. "I'm sorry, but we have to investigate every complaint we receive. Miss Marina, we need you to come with us to the station to answer some questions." Marina felt the floor drop beneath her. How had this happened? How had a simple mistake turned into a police investigation? I don't understand," Marina stammered. "Who would make such a complaint? And why?" Detective Lopez pulled out a notebook from his pocket. "According to the complaint, you've been acting suspiciously since the incident. Apparently, you've been asking a lot of questions about the store's security and internal procedures." Marina blinked, confused. "But, that was part of the sensitivity workshop. Mr. Rodriguez asked me to organize it. I was trying to understand how the company works to be able to." "Marina," Mr. Gomez interrupted gently, "I think it's best you don't say anything else without a lawyer present." Tears welled up in Marina's eyes. "But I haven't done anything wrong. This is a mistake." At that moment, the office door burst open. To everyone's surprise, it was Carlos, panting as if he had run. "Wait," he shouted. "Stop." The detectives turned to him, surprised. "Sir, this is a police investigation. You can't." "I made the complaint," Carlos blurted out. "But it was a mistake. A terrible mistake." Silence fell over the room. All eyes were on Carlos, who seemed to be struggling to find the right words. I was jealous," he finally admitted, his voice cracking with shame. After everything that happened with Mr. Rodriguez, Marina suddenly became everyone's favorite. She organized that workshop, everyone praised her. "I've worked here for years and never received that kind of recognition." Marina couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Carlos, why?" Carlos lowered his gaze, unable to face Marina. "I'm so sorry, Marina. I didn't think the police would take it seriously. I just wanted, I don't know, to scare you a little. To make you feel what I was feeling. But when I saw the police show up, I realized how stupid I'd been." Detective Garcia frowned. "Sir, are you admitting that you filed a false report?" Carlos nodded miserably. "Yes, and I'm willing to face the consequences. But please, don't punish Marina for my stupidity." Mr. Gomez, who had been listening with an expression of disbelief, finally spoke. "Detectives, what does this mean for Marina?" Detective Lopez sighed, putting away his notebook. Well, given that the complainant has admitted it was all a lie, there's no case against Miss Marina. However, he added, looking at Carlos, filing a false report is a serious crime. We'll have to take you in for questioning. Carlos nodded, resigned. I understand. Just. Marina, I'm truly sorry. I never wanted things to go this far. Marina, still stunned by everything that was happening, could only nod silently. The detectives led Carlos away, leaving Marina, Lucia, and Mr. Gomez in an astonished silence. Well, Mr. Gomez finally said, I think we all need a moment to process this. Marina, why don't you take the day off? You've been through a lot this morning. Marina shook her head. No, I'm fine. I'd rather stay and work. I need to feel like things are normal. Lucia put a hand on Marina's shoulder. Are you sure? No one would blame you if you wanted to go home. I'm sure, Marina said firmly. Besides, someone needs to cover Carlos's shift, right? Mr. Gomez nodded slowly. All right, if that's what you want. But if at any point you feel like you need a break, just let me know. Marina thanked him and left the office, closely followed by Lucia. As they headed to their stations, Lucia kept casting worried glances at her friend. Marina, she finally said, are you really okay? Because I'd be furious if someone had done that to me. Marina stopped and looked at Lucia. Honestly, I don't know how I feel. I'm angry, yes, but also, sad. Sad that Carlos felt he had to do something like that. Sad that after everything we went through with the workshop, there's still so much resentment. Lucia nodded sympathetically. I know. It's hard. But remember, change doesn't happen overnight. The important thing is that we keep trying. Marina smiled weakly. You're right. Thanks, Lucia. I don't know what I'd do without you. The rest of the day passed in a blur for Marina. She tried to focus on her work, but she couldn't stop thinking about Carlos and how close she had come to serious trouble because of him. The other employees, who had quickly learned what had happened, treated her with a mix of sympathy and curiosity. Near the end of her shift, Marina saw Mr. Gomez come out of his office with a concerned expression. He approached her with a determined step. Marina, he said quietly, Mr. Rodriguez is on the phone. He wants to speak with you. Marina felt her heart race. What could Mr. Rodriguez want? Were things going to get even worse? With trembling legs, she followed Mr. Gomez to his office. She picked up the phone with an unsteady hand. Hello, she said, her voice barely audible. Marina, Mr. Rodriguez's voice sounded serious on the other end of the line. I've heard about what happened this morning. Are you all right? Marina was surprised by the concern in his voice. Yes, sir. I'm fine. Just a bit shaken. I understand, Mr. Rodriguez said. Listen, Marina, what happened to you is unacceptable. I want you to know that I'll be taking measures to ensure something like this never happens again. Marina felt a pang of worry. Mr. Rodriguez, please don't be too hard on Carlos. I know what he did was wrong, but, Marina, Mr. Rodriguez interrupted, your compassion is admirable. But what Carlos did was serious. He not only put you in a terrible situation, but he also abused police resources. There must be consequences. Marina sighed. I understand, sir. However, Mr. Rodriguez continued, your reaction to all of this has impressed me once again. You've shown maturity and compassion beyond your years. And that's why I'd like to make you an offer. Marina held her breath, waiting. I want you to lead a company-wide training program, Mr. Rodriguez said. Not just about prejudice, but also conflict resolution and effective communication. I believe your experience and perspective would be invaluable. Marina was speechless for a moment. I don't know what to say, Mr. Rodriguez. It's an honor, but, are you sure I'm the right person for this? Absolutely sure, Mr. Rodriguez responded firmly. You've demonstrated an exceptional ability to learn from your mistakes and help others do the same. That's exactly what we need. Marina felt a mix of excitement and fear at the prospect. Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. I'll do my best. I know you will, Mr. Rodriguez said. Now, go home and rest. Tomorrow is a new day, and we have a lot of work ahead of us. After hanging up, Marina sat in silence for a moment, trying to process everything that had just happened. Mr. Gomez, who had been waiting patiently, looked at her curiously. Everything okay, Marina? He asked. Marina nodded slowly. Yes, it's been a very long day. Mr. Gomez smiled sympathetically. I know. Why don't you go home now? You've had enough excitement for one day. Marina thanked him and headed to the locker room to collect her things. As she changed, she couldn't stop thinking about Mr. Rodriguez's offer. It was an incredible opportunity, but also a huge responsibility. Was she really ready for something like this? As she left the store, she saw Lucia waiting for her at the door. Hey, Lucia said with a smile. I thought you might need some company to walk home. Marina smiled gratefully. Thanks, Lucia. I really do. As they walked, Marina told Lucia about Mr. Rodriguez's offer. That's amazing, Marina. Lucia exclaimed. I'm so proud of you. Marina sighed. Thank you, but I don't know if I can do it. What if I make another mistake? What if I let everyone down again? Lucia stopped and looked at Marina seriously. Listen to me, Marina. Yes, you've made mistakes. But what's important is how you've learned from them. You've grown more in these past few weeks than some people do in years. You're exactly the person they need for this job. Marina felt tears well up in her eyes. Thank you, Lucia. I don't know what I'd do without you. You'd probably go crazy, Lucia joked, hugging her friend. Now, how about we go celebrate? I think you've earned some ice cream. Marina laughed, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. That sounds perfect. As they walked toward the ice cream shop, Marina couldn't help but think about how much her life had changed in such a short time. From cashier to nearly losing her job, and now about to lead a training program for the entire company. It was surreal. The next day, Marina arrived early at the store, determined to start on the right foot. However, as soon as she entered, she noticed something was wrong. The employees were gathered in small groups, whispering to each other and casting furtive glances toward Mr. Gomez's office. What's going on? She asked Pedro, who was nearby. Pedro looked at her with a mix of concern and curiosity. It's Carlos. Apparently, Mr. Rodriguez came early this morning and took him to the head office. No one knows what's going to happen to him. Marina felt a pang of guilt. Despite what Carlos had done, she couldn't help but feel responsible in some way. At that moment, Mr. Gomez came out of his office, his face serious. Everyone, gather in the conference room in 5 minutes. We have an important announcement to make. The employees exchanged nervous looks before heading to the conference room. Marina sat next to Lucia, her heart pounding. Mr. Gomez entered, followed by Mr. Rodriguez. A tense silence fell over the room. Good morning, everyone, Mr. Rodriguez began. I know these past few weeks have been difficult for all of you, and I appreciate your patience and professionalism during this time. However, recent events have made it clear that we need to make some changes in our organization. He paused, his eyes scanning the room before continuing. As some of you may already know, Carlos has been removed from his position due to his recent actions. A murmur spread through the room. Marina felt her stomach churn. However, Mr. Rodriguez continued, after much reflection and discussion with Carlos, we've decided to give him a second chance. The murmur turned into a buzz of surprise. Marina looked up, astonished. Carlos has agreed to participate in an intensive training and therapy program, Mr. Rodriguez explained. If he completes the program satisfactorily, he will be offered a position at one of our other stores, where he will have the opportunity to prove he has learned from his mistakes. Marina couldn't believe what she was hearing. Despite everything that had happened, Mr. Rodriguez was giving Carlos a second chance, just like he had given her. Now, Mr. Rodriguez continued, this brings me to the second announcement of the day. As part of our commitment to improving our company culture, we will be implementing a new training program company-wide. This program will focus on topics such as diversity, inclusion, conflict resolution, and effective communication. His eyes landed on Marina. And I'm delighted to announce that this program will be led by our very own Marina. All eyes turned to her. Marina felt her cheeks flush, but she forced herself to maintain her composure. Marina has shown an extraordinary ability to learn from her mistakes and help others do the same, Mr. Rodriguez continued. I believe her experience and perspective will be invaluable to this program. Mr. Rodriguez gestured for Marina to join him at the front of the room. With trembling legs, Marina stood and walked toward him. Marina, Mr. Rodriguez said, do you have anything to say to your colleagues? Marina looked at the room full of familiar faces. She saw curiosity, surprise, and, in some cases, skepticism. She took a deep breath before speaking. I want to thank you all for your patience and understanding over these past weeks, she began. I know it hasn't been easy. I made a terrible mistake, and the consequences of that mistake have affected all of us. She paused, searching for the right words. But I've also learned a lot. I've learned about my own prejudices and how to overcome them. I've learned about the power of empathy and the importance of second chances. And, most of all, I've learned that we all have the ability to grow and improve. Marina noticed some of her colleagues nodding, encouraging her to continue. This new program isn't just about me teaching you something, she continued. It's about all of us learning together. About creating a workplace where everyone feels valued and respected, regardless of their appearance or background. She looked directly at her colleagues, her voice gaining confidence. I know it won't be easy. We'll have to face uncomfortable truths about ourselves and our prejudices. But I believe that if we work together, we can create something truly special here. A place where mistakes aren't the end of the story, but the beginning of something better. When Marina finished speaking, there was a moment of silence. Then, to her surprise, Lucia began clapping. Slowly, the rest of the employees joined in until the room was filled with applause. Mr. Rodriguez smiled, clearly pleased. Thank you, Marina. I think you've captured perfectly the spirit of what we're trying to achieve. As the meeting dispersed and the employees returned to their stations, Marina stayed behind, still processing everything that had just happened. Mr. Rodriguez approached her. You did very well, Marina, he said. But I want you to understand something. This won't be an easy road. Marina nodded. I know, sir. There will be resistance, Mr. Rodriguez continued. Some people won't want to change. Others will think this is a waste of time. And there will be moments when you'll wonder if all of this is worth it. I understand, Marina said. How do I handle that? Mr. Rodriguez smiled. With patience, persistence, and compassion. Remember, you're asking people to question beliefs they've held their entire lives. It's not easy. But if you can show them the value of change, if you can help them see how this will not only improve our workplace but also their personal lives, then you will succeed. Marina nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. I'll do my best, sir. I know you will, Mr. Rodriguez said. And remember, you're not alone in this. You have my full support, and Mr. Gomez's as well. And I think you'll find that many of your colleagues are more than willing to help once they understand what we're trying to achieve. As Mr. Rodriguez walked away, Marina stood there, reflecting on everything that had happened and everything that was to come. It wasn't going to be easy, but she was determined to make it work. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity for Marina. Between her regular job and planning the new training program, she barely had time to breathe. But despite the stress and long hours, she felt more alive than ever. One day, while working on the outline for the first module of the program, Lucia approached her desk. Hey, big shot, Lucia joked. Do you have a moment for your old friend? Marina smiled, grateful for the interruption. I always have time for you, Lucia. What's up? Lucia sat on the edge of the desk. Well, a few of us were talking and we wanted to know if you need help with the program. You know, research, designing materials, that sort of thing. Marina blinked, surprised. Really? That would be amazing. But, are you sure? It's going to be a lot of extra work. Lucia nodded. Absolutely sure. Look, Marina, what you're doing is important. Not just for the company, but for all of us. We want to be part of it. Marina felt a lump form in her throat. Thank you, Lucia. That means a lot to me. No problem, Lucia said with a smile. Besides, someone has to make sure you don't go crazy with all of this. Marina laughed. Who says it's not already too late for that? As Lucia walked away, Marina was left thinking about how much things had changed. Just a few weeks ago, she had felt alone and scared, fearing she would lose her job. Now, she was leading a program that could change the entire company, and her colleagues were eager to help. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. Marina met with Mr. Gomez to discuss the logistical details of the program, worked on the content for the first module, and met with some of her colleagues to discuss how they could contribute. When it was finally time to close the store, Marina felt exhausted but satisfied. As she gathered her things, she noticed an envelope on her desk that hadn't been there before. Curious, she opened it. Inside was a handwritten note. Marina, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but I felt I needed to write you. I want to thank you for not pushing to have me fired. Mr. Rodriguez told me that you advocated for me to have a second chance. I can't express how much that means to me. I know what I did was terrible, and I have no excuse. But thanks to you, I have the chance to make things right. The therapy and training program has been tough, but I'm learning a lot about myself and why I acted the way I did. I still have a long way to go, but I want you to know that I'm committed to changing. I hope that one day I can earn your forgiveness. Until then, I wish you all the best in your new role. I know you'll do an amazing job. Sincerely, Carlos. Marina read the note several times, feeling a mix of emotions. There had been moments in the past few weeks when she had questioned whether she had done the right thing by advocating for Carlos. This note reassured her that she had. She tucked the note into her bag and left the store, feeling renewed despite the long day. As she walked home, she reflected on everything that had happened. A simple mistake had triggered a series of events that had changed her life and the lives of many others. It had been a difficult journey, full of moments of doubt and fear. But it had also been a journey of growth, learning, and second chances. Marina smiled to herself. She didn't know exactly what the future held, but she was excited to find out. She had a new purpose, a new challenge, and she was ready to face it with everything she had learned. As the sun set on the horizon, Marina realized that this wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter filled with possibilities, growth, and the chance to make a real difference in the lives of those around her. And with that thought, Marina kept walking home, ready to face whatever challenges tomorrow might bring.